Science is under attack in Washington. This is how the New York Times describes the situation. In just 3 years, the Trump administration has diminished the role of science in federal policymaking while halting or disrupting research projects nationwide, marking a transformation of the federal government whose effects, experts say, could reverberate for years. The biggest impact is being felt in climate change as regulations that prevent pollution are being gutted and scientific findings about the environment are being challenged or buried. But the problem is even more widespread than that. I'm going to quote the Times one more time. The erosion of science reaches well beyond the environment and climate. In San Francisco, a study of the effects of chemicals on pregnant women is stalled after federal funding abruptly ended. In Washington, D.C., a scientific committee that provided expertise in defending against invasive insects has been disbanded. In Kansas City, Missouri, the hasty relocation of 2 agricultural agencies that fund crop science and study the economics of farming has led to an exodus of employees and delayed hundreds of millions of dollars in research. Joining us now, environmental author and climate commentator Betsy Rosenberg. Thanks for joining us, Betsy. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and thanks for covering this story.
We know that this administration took office with a pro-business policy and that their focuses would include the emphasis of business interests over environmental interests. But that doesn't really describe the width and depth of this administration's assault on science and the environment. So I'm wondering, how would you describe the Trump administration's view of both science and the environment?
They have a dim view. They do not respect science or scientists or experts in their field. They have shown that, proven that way too many times. When they came in, the Trump administration, those of us who have been working to raise awareness among the American public, citizens, in terms of not just climate, but our oceans crisis, our extinction crisis, we were hoping it wouldn't be as bad as we feared. It's been worse. And the thought of another administration like this that is taking us faster towards a climate cliff while the climate window to act is closing is more frightening than what's in my inbox every morning, which is scary enough in terms of what's going on with our ecosystems and nature. It's unthinkable. I covered the environment now 2 decades, and under President George W. Bush, we couldn't believe the assault on science and climate change and the environment. That was, before climate change was a climate crisis. We were calling it global warming back then. Now it is a climate emergency, and what this administration is doing is unthinkable, and it's really criminal. And never in my wildest dreams did I think we'd be at the stage in 2020 now where we should have really clear vision, climate clarity. Would we be, seeing an administration that is closing their eyes, shutting their ears, and opening their pocketbooks?
I'm hoping to ask you about some of the specific policy shifts in just a moment, but it is more than that. As we were reporting, we're seeing thousands of career or long-term public officials leaving government in response to Trump administration actions like cutting funding or changing approaches or relocating offices and relocating jobs. What will the long-term impacts of that exodus be? And if these officials are the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, why isn't anybody heeding their warnings?
Well, that's a good question. Part of the reason is those warnings have not been reported enough consistently and widely and deeply enough by the mainstream news media. The warnings have not been heard because we have not been focused as a country on the environment. I say our environment. The air out there, take a breath, quickly becomes our environment. This is our life support system, and we have treated it. It's sort of a cultural thing, I guess, in America, because we're, all about individual rights and freedom. It's okay to drive gas-guzzling SUVs. It's okay to have huge, wasteful McMansions. It's okay to have a heavy meat diet. All these things that we have done for so long have real consequences. And it's not like anyone's going to come take your SUV or your steak or your whatever away. It's more that if we love our kids, country, and planet, shouldn't we be doing a lot more now that we know, what the science has been telling us and has too long been ignored or diminished? Shouldn't we be doing everything in our power at every level, as citizens, as communities, as a country, corporations, to be trying to reverse the damage? So yes, there's an exodus of good scientists leaving that doesn't get reported, probably because it's Christmas, New Year's week. It's a slow week, and the New York Times has been one of the newspapers that has been really in leadership position. They did this long, in-depth article, but those of us in the environmental climate activism circle, community, whatever, have been aware of this from day one, and it's only getting worse. And the fact that not enough Americans really understand what's at stake for all of us. I live in Texas now. I used to live in California. I have neighbors who don't believe climate change is real. There is such a need for action, raising eco-literacy, and to answer your question, by diminishing the power and the intelligence and the authority of the scientists at the EPA, which we now dub the Environmental Plundering Agency, not Protection Agency. It's you can't even put words on it because we're not going to get this back so quickly, and it's been happening too quietly behind the scenes, and so we're not seeing quality science come out. We're not seeing enough valid research done, and on every level, this is just damning our kids' future.
It also suggests to me, Betsy, that when we look at this, it means that these agencies will be less prepared to deal with and account for scientific evidence going forward, which could hamper these agencies not just now but in the future, and sort of continuing this process on for the unforeseeable future.
This administration, and I'm sorry, but it is mostly conservative Republicans who are the dinosaurs, as I call them, that they would get on a plane in a minute. They believe, all kinds of other science. What is it about climate science that has been so politicized and polarized that our leaders can't even acknowledge what is clearly happening? I mean, look outside your window. Look at the tornadoes. Look at the hurricanes. Look at the floods. Look at what's happening in Australia and the Amazon. They're both burning up, and the ice sheets are melting. What more evidence do we need? So the fact that there's supposed leadership taking us backwards and putting the brakes on progress, undoing some of the hard-fought progress that we saw under the Obama administration, and not even as if that weren't enough, taking us backwards. It's a real threat to all of us, and we cannot afford to have people in charge of policy, especially during this next critical 4-year window, taking us in the wrong direction. Even if we were to be doing everything the scientists say we should be doing, must be doing, and we're not, we still are going to have a really hard time, maybe impossible, turning this ship around, meaning we have 10 years. Now it's 2020. By 2030, we are supposed to be cutting our emissions in half. We're supposed to have cut our emissions in half. That is such a huge undertaking. Imagine that. Our whole society is built around fossil fuels, transportation, air traffic, buildings. Everything needs to change. And we don't stand a chance unless we get leadership in there that gets it, and we are not having a national conversation on a mainstream media outlet someplace. Because here's the good news. There are so many experts, so many scientists, politicians, artists, activists, business people, clean tech experts who have the answers. There's tons we can be doing. And we're not doing it because not enough leadership is asking us to. Not enough Americans are eco-literate. The dots are not being connected, even when we see this extreme weather. The wake-up call is happening too slowly. We need to wake up and smell the carbon in 2020 and get off our gases, or it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be safe for our kids or healthy.
All right, Betsy Rosenberg, who is an environmental author and climate commentator. Betsy, appreciate the warning. Happy New Year. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the coverage.
Up next on RFL, we'll remember two giants in the sports world who just passed away. Yankee legend Don Larson and former NBA Commissioner David Stern will show you how each man made history.